thank you everybody for joining us today. I know this is not under the most ideal conditions. And, in the last 7 weeks, I mean, this is just a number I've been following for the last 8 weeks. And, 30 million people have lost their jobs. It's nearly 10% of the entire U.S. population. Unemployment rates are expected to be probably close to 20%, if not higher in certain areas. They're already significantly higher than that. And, having spent my entire life and career studying and sharing best hiring and interviewing practices with employers as well as candidates, it's definitely a heartbreaking thing for me. This particular project, compassionate outplacement, compassionate and legal outplacement, was born from something that happened to me. March 16th was for me, D-Day. We're in California. And that's the Monday after our governor put a stay-at-home order in place. And, we were facing potentially having to do layoffs of our own. And that was probably one of the most emotional moments of my entire life, having to potentially part with the folks that have helped build a great company, 2 great companies that we have, and folks that I care about a lot and gotten to know both personally and professionally over the years. And it was just unfathomable to me that I would have to do that. And so, we really got to work, and we've created over 75 content pieces, guides, checklists, resources, articles to help both employers and employees through this process, either to prevent layoffs or to help manage that process. So that's a little bit about where this was born from. Today, ultimately, we're going to talk about how to compassionately and legally disperse our workforce. Just a little bit about me. My name's Fletcher Wimbush, and I own 2 companies. One is a talent SaaS company, software company. We focus on talent acquisition, talent assessment, and performance management software tools. And our other company is a professional search company that primarily focuses in the tax and accounting world, as well as the AEC, architectural engineering, construction arenas. We do some other miscellaneous work there. And so between those 2 companies, we spent a lot of time creating over 1,500 content pieces related to hiring and recruiting best practices. Ultimately, we've written a book, Hiring Talented Team Players, and we're also just releasing our flip side of that book, Get America Back to Work, a guide to getting back to work fast for those folks that have lost their jobs. And all of the proceeds of that book are going directly to workforce development programs. 100% of the money generated from that is going there. So folks that are in the most vulnerable populations will get the benefit of those resources. And as our companies combined, we're matching dollar for dollar those purchases of the book, as well as guaranteeing a $10,000 donation to, starting with a local workforce development program here called Working Wardrobes here in Orange County. And we hope to be able to expand that to others throughout the country. And we're also working on May 20th is a stand-ups and salute. So collaboration with 8 other charities. We're hoping to triple that donation and get that to $60,000 overall donation. So the $20,000 we're committing, and another 40 from other donors. So that would be amazing for them, and particularly the veterans that they help, as well as everybody else who are definitely in the most vulnerable situations. Many of our workers that we're probably talking about today are probably in a much better place than these folks are. So, it's a way for us to give back and help our mission, which is get people back to work, get America back to work fast. So that's enough about me. I'm gotten to know Iris Christoph here over the last few weeks, and she's an amazing person and a talented employment attorney. So Iris, tell us a little bit about you and your background and your practice.
Well, hats off to you, Fletcher, for all your efforts to help people that are really having a tough time during this challenging time. My practice is focused almost exclusively on employment law. I do some business litigation as well. I was a plaintiff's attorney for most of my career, and over the last year, I've been advising businesses and employers on best practices, employment litigation, the whole gamut for employment law. I've worked for the CDC. I have a master's in public health. I'm not a scientist, but I can give some advice on best practices for either keeping your workforce furloughed, employed during this time, for conducting layoffs. And then also, I know the big question on everyone's mind right now is how do we keep our workers safe when they return to the workplace? So we'll chat about all those things today and some potential legal claims to look out for down the road, because once the courts open, I believe that we're going to have a nice flood of employment claims coming out of all of this. So get ready.
Yeah. 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 And so we definitely want to mitigate those, and we want to mitigate those risks. So thank you. And yeah, you're not a scientist, but I think you're getting closer to becoming one, right? Through this, you're learning all the tricks. So that's what we were talking about earlier before we were getting started. So looking forward to some of those insights there. So if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat there. Iris, I don't know, are you able to track the chat? Okay.
Let me see if I can get it pulled up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm having a little trouble on my end because I'm doing the presentation and got the video. Okay, cool.
So if I interrupt you, Fletcher, I'll just interrupt with questions, but everybody feel free to send in questions. I enjoy that part the most during this because we can make it interactive, unlike a normal presentation where maybe we save questions for the end. I'm always happy to answer them as we go.
Yeah, we have a full hour blocked off, so I know we should have plenty of time for questions. If we're talking about a particular topic and you want to, chime in and want more detail or have a specific question there related to your situation, then we're happy to pause for a second and try to tackle that best we can. So, obviously, having to do layoffs, and as particularly in this COVID time, I mean, the financial hit that we're all taking is enormous. So, aside from trying to mitigate the initial kind of cash outlay that we're facing by not doing furloughs or not laying off, or the reason why we're doing these to begin with, there's a lot of these kind of hidden costs. Obviously, some of the things that Iris are talking about is retooling our workforce or our workplace and workspaces to make sure that they're safe so that we can go back to work. And that's going to be the case for a lot of workplaces who can't do it remotely. But then there's also this, flood of litigation and employment claims that we're potentially going to be facing. And these are the things that we haven't even begun thinking about, that we're trying to make people more aware of. But just as it stood prior to all this, 10% of all terminations, it doesn't matter what the reason was, will result in a fully litigated employment claim. And the average cost of that is $250,000. This comes from the U.S. Small Business Administration, as well as big names like Hiscox Financial, who study these things. I mean, literally, I went through every single study that they've done for the last 10 years, and it just basically hasn't changed, but it's only gone up. In 9 states, including California, Georgia, New York, several others, there's a 50% higher chance of it being fully litigated. And this isn't even talking about the arbitrated claims, the ones that are going at the low level claims that maybe cost thousands of dollars, some of the simpler wage and hour disputes or things like that, right? So, we're going to be facing a tough time. So whatever we can do to mitigate that, both on the legal side as well as how we handle that, we're going to talk a lot about. Obviously, unemployment insurance is just going to go through the roof. So that whatever we can do to get people to get back to work faster and get off of unemployment is definitely going to lower our long-term costs for our workforce. One of the things we'll talk about today, and Iris has a great kind of case study on this. Everybody's heard of the bird thing. I'll let her talk a little more about it, but it's just promoting a positive corporate responsibility and protecting our corporate brand, both from the outside world, but internally as our employer brand as well. Because as we do want to get back to work and we do want to rehire people, and we are using this as an opportunity to strengthen our teams, we don't want to create a bad reputation for ourselves as employers. Glassdoor, Indeed, people can go and say whatever they want about employers, and we need to really do our best to manage that. So litigation costs, we talked about, U.S. Business Administration. looking at it 1 in 100, or, it's about a 10% chance, 10 or 15% chance. So if you're a 100-person company, you're looking at $62,000 automatically in potential litigation costs. Most of our business insurances probably have high deductibles in the $50,000 to $100,000 range for these things. So definitely going to be a big hit. The unemployment insurance we talked about. Again, if you have a company of 500 employees, you're looking at just 0.25% increase. You're looking at an $18,000 increase in your unemployment costs. One thing we didn't talk about already, which I think is a big piece of this, we are trying to salvage our teams. We're trying to salvage our companies. Unwanted turnover. If we don't handle layoffs or furloughs or this whole COVID situation, for that matter, in a compassionate way, we're really facing creating a scenario where our very best people are going to look at us as employers and say, do I really want to work at a place who's treated their employees this way or hasn't done everything they possibly can? And losing a top performer costs a ton of money. So, we're doing it wrong. We increase the chances of having that unwanted turnover by 31%. And obviously it's not something we're going to see today, but it's something you're going to see in the next, 2, 3, 9, 12 months. And, it's a very hidden cost there. And having to replace a top performer can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars ultimately in that. And particularly those hidden costs, just getting people back up to speed, full productivity, lost opportunity costs are huge when we lose a top performer. So, if you're a company of 100 employees, you're looking at in the millions of potential hidden costs here if we don't do this right. So it's a huge thing we want to be thinking about beyond the most immediate problem and start planning for this. And we'll talk a little bit more about planning later in the session. So 4 things that we want to consider before downsizing. Obviously, this is the thing that I went through emotionally and we've all been thinking about, I'm sure, but we'll bring these up. We'll talk about this a little bit in case there's a new idea here for you. If you're furloughing, a friend of mine, he's continued to pay his health insurance for his employees for 3 months for over 3,000 employees. Thought this was a really great gesture. It's also a way to, properly furlough those folks and make sure that you're maintaining some of those benefits. And, Iris can address that some more, but that's a big benefit, especially if you have a lot of low paid workers. It goes a long way to help and save them their financial situation, because health insurance is, super expensive. Temporary or partial pay reductions. There's a great story of a company up in Seattle who have a merchant services company. They're the guys who had the $70,000 minimum base pay for all their employees. And they obviously took a huge hit in merchant services. So what they did is they went, and you can do this a lot of different ways, but they thought this was a great creative way. They went to all their employees. They confidentially asked them how much they'd be willing to take in a pay reduction. And they collected all that information. And when they looked at it, it bought them 6 to 9 months runway where they wouldn't have to lay anybody off. And everybody voluntarily picked their own number. What a creative way to deal with this situation. Other companies I've seen have tiered it. So their lowest paid people have gotten 0 or the smallest pay reduction, and then just tiered it up into 3 or 4 or even 6 tiers to, the highest paid person, taking the largest reduction. I took 100% pay cut when this happened personally. So, for smaller businesses, a great option is potentially, if you've got a top performer, an A player, is offering equity or ownership. And so that can, in exchange for pay, so maybe there's a large pay reduction, but you have a top performer who's really crucial, maybe a software developer, CTO or something like that, maybe even a salesperson, marketing person who's really integral to your long-term success and driving revenue or creating the products that you offer. You may consider that as a great option. So another thing that we've worked on is helping loan workforces to other businesses. Maybe that's on a temporary basis. And so there's going to be a lot of temporary jobs open up in manufacturing, as well as while manufacturing gets back up and running, they're going to have a spike in workforces. They're going to need people for maybe 90 days or 180 days, especially grocery, logistics, places like that, especially there's a lot of frontline workers. They're hiring like crazy right now, but it's going to be temporary. These people they're not going to be able to keep these workforces on forever. So great opportunity to connect your workforce with these opportunities, get them a job that's going to last them, 9 months or 3 months or 90 days or something like that. And so that they can keep busy, keep productive. And then when you're ready to bring them back, that they're ready to go. And, they've been keeping sharp on their skills and maybe learning new skills and bring those back to your workforce. So I want to turn it over to Iris. She was well introduced there. So Iris, I'll kind of, I guess, click through the slides here as you go, or you can prompt me. And I'm going to shut my window here, guys. I got some noise going. I'll be right back. And the beauties of working at home. And Iris, I'll let you kick it off.
Alrighty, sounds good. I've been answering some Q&As. Happy to do that. I know the first question was regarding how are we going to be conducting layoffs in a virtual world. And we're going to talk in depth about that today with respect to the Bird layoffs. Bird e-scooters did a virtual layoff and things didn't go so well. So we can learn from that situation and go over the do's and don'ts for virtual layoffs if that's something that your business is even considering. There's lots of options in terms of how to conduct layoffs when we're going through a pandemic situation. But first and foremost, there are lots of different strategies for reducing your labor costs during this time. The one option is obviously the layoff option. And that's one of the more drastic options because doing a layoff, you're basically terminating your employees. You would select certain categories of workers to lay off. A furlough is basically where you're hitting the pause button on the employment relationship, but they are an employee. So you're going to maintain if you offer health insurance benefits, you're going to keep those going. You're probably not going to let them accrue PTO or sick time, but you may want to allow them to use that PTO or sick time during a furlough to get some extra wages. With the furloughs, though, there are a lot of legal pitfalls that you can run into. If a furlough goes on for too long, it's effectively a termination in the eyes of the California courts. Courts don't care about the semantics in California. They're really, really tough on employers. So you've got to be really careful about limiting the duration of the furlough. I don't want to see a furlough that's longer than 6 months. That's what I tell my clients. Keep it under 6 months, and at the very least, let's do it in increments rather than doing a full 6-month furlough. There's other great strategies too, reducing hours. If you've got hourly employees or a large workforce that's made up of primarily hourly employees, that's a really easy way to get some cost savings. If your workforce is made up of salaried employees, reductions in hours are not going to work because if a salaried exempt employee performs 1 minute of work in a work week, you got to pay them the full salary. So the tactic to reduce labor costs for a workforce that's made up of salaried employees is going to be a lot different than what we're going to use for a high hourly workforce. So for a salaried workforce, we might want to think about reducing the salaries because we can do that as long as they're getting paid 2 times minimum wage. That's going to be the requirement. That's basically California's minimum wage law for salaried employees. It's 2 times minimum wage. So as long as they're above that threshold, it's all good. We can make a salary reduction plan and prepare for those, though. We want to give notice in writing if we can. Same thing for your hourly workers. If you're going to reduce hours, let them know in advance. We cannot cut pay backwards. We can only do it prospectively, not retroactively. So just be careful. Those wage and hour pitfalls are huge in California. Even though the courts are closed right now, we're going to see once they open up, as they start to open up, we're going to see new lawsuits being filed. And then another option is a voluntary unpaid leave of absence. Right now, with remote work being available to a lot of employees, it's something that you can offer if they'd like to just take the time off, if that's a possibility for your business. Maybe not a ton of employees are going to be jumping at that right now because if you do a voluntary unpaid leave, you're probably not going to qualify for unemployment benefits. And an employer is probably going to elect to do a furlough versus an unpaid leave. Okay, we can go on to the next one. Let's see. Okay, so here is the Bird case study that I was mentioning. So Bird did a huge layoff. I believe it was about a month ago, approximately. So they laid off over 400 employees via a Zoom meeting. Nobody knew when they sent out the invitation for the Zoom meeting. They didn't have any discussion about what this was regarding. Most employees had not heard anything regarding an update on the pandemic, Bird's response to the pandemic. So they all assumed that it was just going to be like a town hall type of meeting to discuss next steps for how to handle a pandemic. In reality, it was a layoff meeting, and everybody who attended basically had that meeting on their public calendar. So other employees could see who was getting laid off, after they realized it was a layoff. And then the person that was actually holding the meeting, none of the employees knew who it was. It was not someone who was affiliated with Bird. It was an outside party. So, there's a lot that we can take from the Bird layoffs and really analyze it and use to help us understand what's going to be effective for a virtual layoff and what won't. So for a virtual layoff, if that's something that your business is considering doing, I would really strongly suggest that you have the direct managers conducting the virtual layoff. Don't get 400 employees in a Zoom meeting and do a layoff. Have it a team by team meeting. And also give the employees an opportunity to respond, a brief opportunity to ask questions. Have a go-to person who's going to answer those questions for those employees, because they're going to be soaking it all in and they're likely going to have follow-up questions afterwards. So you need to be able to give them that contact information so that they can ask those really important questions. This is going to leave employees with a good taste in their mouth versus something like Bird, where it was just, everybody on the chopping block all at once, no opportunity to ask questions. And it's not with a familiar face. So we want to use a familiar face, and then also follow up in writing after the layoff to let them know in writing that they've been laid off. Get your paper trail started. So, obviously the Bird layoffs, not the best strategy. Probably we're just trying to go through the motions and get it done and didn't really think it through. So my biggest tip to businesses right now is plan and prepare. If you're going to need to do a layoff, figure out who's going to conduct the actual layoff, have the meetings. Another option is do it over the phone. I've had a lot of clients conducting the layoffs over the phone, and then they tell the employees, we can either mail out the final paycheck or you can come in and get it. And when they stagger the times that employees are coming to pick up the final paycheck. So I would advise, I'm not a huge fan of the virtual layoffs. I think a telephone call is probably a better option, but it just depends on the size of the layoff. If you're doing a huge layoff, phone calls might not be practical, but telephone layoffs are another way to do it. You can send an email, but sending an email is pretty impersonal. I would at least do a phone call and follow up with an email to get your paper trail. And of course, in California, doing layoffs, you could be exposed to a ton of wage and hour issues. You've got to make sure you pay out final wages at the time of the termination meeting. If you do a layoff, you need to have that final paycheck ready to go. You have to get authorization from the employee to do direct deposit, or just tell the employee to come on by and pick up that final paycheck. Or you have to get their authorization, and I would get it in writing if they want the final paycheck mailed to them. The other big one is the WARN Act. So in California, Governor Newsom has loosened some of the requirements for when the WARN Act would apply and to whom, and when notice needs to be provided to workers. And we're going to get through this in a little bit. But if you're doing a layoff that affects more than 50 employees, you're going to fall under the WARN Act. So we want to make sure that we're really careful about following all the WARN Act requirements. Okay, so with respect to the WARN Act, what it really entails is that you give your employees at least 60 days notice of the layoff. That's not practical in a pandemic situation. So Governor Newsom has basically loosened that requirement, and right now the requirement is that you provide as much notice to your employees of the layoff or mass furlough as possible. So when I have clients that come to me and say, Iris, we're thinking about doing a layoff, first we figure out what size, how many employees are going to be affected. And then if it's going to be a 50 or more situation, then we need to start letting people know ASAP. And that would be through a written letter. And then you also need to notify certain government entities of the layoff. And it's really through the EDD's website. They have a whole department that just deals with WARN Act notifications. So keep that in mind if you're doing a layoff that's going to have an effect on 50 or more employees. Okay, let me take a look back at some of these Q&As and see if I can.
Yeah, there's a question about severance there too. That's an interesting question. You know, what are you seeing there? Or some of your employers, you know, considering severances, right?
Yeah, I mean, severances are a great option if you can. I was kind of going through with another client yesterday about how do you pick and choose who to offer a severance to? Well, there's a couple ways. Number one, if you've got an employee that you know is going to put up a big stink or a fight, it could be a legal battle. It could just be someone who's highly emotional, someone who feel like they were the founder of your business and you're laying them off. They're going to be majorly annoyed, and they might file a wrongful termination claim. How do you get around that? One option is to offer a severance. So a severance is basically a release of claims, meaning you get the certainty of knowing that that person is not going to sue you, but you have to pay them a certain amount of money, or consideration is the legal term. So in exchange for that money, you are getting a release of claims from the employee. You cannot force someone to sign a severance, but you can offer it and you can sweeten the pot. So to sweeten the pot, you're going to either offer them more money, or you're going to offer them paid health insurance benefits, paid COBRA coverage. There's a lot of different ways and things that you can offer an employee. And certain employees, so employees over age 40, they need a certain amount of time to review that severance with an attorney, or just to review it on their own. It's at least 21 days. They can waive the 21 days and sign it sooner, but you've got to give them time. So as part of your layoff, if you're looking to offer a severance to an employee, what you would do is at the time of layoff, you would let them know, hey, in light of your service, in light of the length of your employment, we're willing to offer you basically a severance pay. And I usually couch it in terms of, we're offering you 4 weeks of severance pay, or however many weeks you want to do it. And then you provide them with a written severance agreement that you need to get from your legal counsel. So you ask your attorney to prepare a severance agreement, and it would lay out the release of claims and then the amount of severance pay or consideration that you're offering them. Again, can't force anybody to sign it, but it's really nice if you get it signed. And if you have the funds available, I would highly recommend offering it to those employees that either have been great employees who you think could potentially raise a legal claim against your company. And those are usually the two major factors for when we think about offering a severance agreement.
Yeah, and part of the question is, are we seeing a trend in that? You know, tend to see it a lot more in nonprofits and government-based type jobs.
It's different for every employer.
Yeah.
Together. I mean, the trend is always, we'd love to have assigned severance from the employee.
Yeah.
But sometimes employers are really wary of offering one because they think it could be a tip-off to the employee that, hey, something was wrong or we mishandled something. I'm not of that mindset, especially if it's a long-term employee and you value their service, offer it. I mean, it's just something that's a professional courtesy. Like, we've appreciated your employment here and we want to offer you this. But not every employer is different, and their strategy is always going to be different. You
hear the Zappos story where they pay employees to leave, right? You know, and I've seen this a lot leading up to this here before the COVID time, but I had, you know, a lot of our entrepreneurial friends, it didn't matter what the reason, they always paid a severance and used severance agreement, right, to mitigate both the legal aspect of it, but also to do kind of the right thing by those folks, right? I'm a big fan of severance agreements if you can get them signed. Some employees look at it as, you know, screw the business. I'm not interested in signing it. I don't want to give away my rights, even if they have no intention of signing or filing a legal claim against the company. Some people just on principle are not interested in. So, you know, it's going to work for some employees, but it might not work for others. Just depends on the specific circumstances. And I always say, consult with legal counsel, talk about your strategy as to how much you're going to offer, because you want to leave room to negotiate too, because oftentimes an employee will come back and say, well, will you give me a couple more weeks of severance pay? And if you went all in, then you're not going to have anything else to negotiate with. And that's fine. But sometimes employers want to just do an initial offering with the understanding that they're probably going to come back and ask for more. And they usually do. If they get an attorney, you know, I was a plaintiff's attorney. I did a lot of severance negotiations. That was my job, to go in and get my client more money. So be prepared for that. It's going to be a negotiation, most likely, in California. Another question from Doc is a percentage of total workforce that's being furloughed or laid off that constitutes a mass layoff.
Sure. Yeah. So there's the California WARN Act, and then there's the federal WARN Act. So when I was going through my kind of spiel on the WARN Act, I was talking about the California WARN Act. The California WARN Act is a little bit more narrow, meaning we need to follow that one even more so than the federal WARN Act, because the federal WARN Act is only going to apply to employee layoffs or furloughs that are affecting 100 or more employees. So we want to go with the more narrow and more applicable WARN Act, which is the California WARN Act. And on that one, we're not looking at a percentage. I mean, there is a percentage to look at, but for purposes of today, what I want you to think about is if we've got 50 or more employees that are affected by a furlough or a layoff situation, you need to get your attorney involved. You need to send out the notification to all the employees in writing, and you need to contact EDD and the appropriate government officials to let them know.
So if you're a smaller company,
very complex, and so it's really something that I would suggest consulting with legal counsel on, because you need to have all your ducks in a row. Otherwise, the risk is you would be on the hook for paying out if you don't properly notify your employees of the furlough or the layoff. You're going to be on the hook for paying them wages and healthcare benefits for the time that you didn't notify them properly. So consult with legal counsel.
Plus penalties probably, right?
Interest and penalties.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see, maybe one last question before we move on. Okay. So yeah, why don't we move on? We didn't get to talk about the FFCRA yet, I don't think, right?
FFCRA, and I'm going to tie this one into the other question that I was asked about premium pay. So sometimes when we've got employees who are furloughed and we're bringing them back, I've got a lot of clients right now that are struggling to bring back employees because the employees are making more on unemployment. With the federal expanded unemployment benefits, you get the additional $600 a week on top of your normal California EDD benefit. So sometimes an employee could be walking away with more money through EDD unemployment benefits than they would if they were working and earning wages that way. How do we get them to come back? If they are a really great worker, we need them back. It's a crucial position. Number one, we want to know, why are they not willing to come back? Is it due to EDD, or is it for other reasons? Lack of childcare. Maybe they're caring for someone who's ill. Maybe they have a medical disability, mental disability, and they're concerned about returning to work during a pandemic. So those are all, first and foremost, I always ask why. Why is this person not willing to come back to work? You're allowed to ask questions. I wouldn't flat out say, do you have a disability? But you just start the conversation and say, hey, is there a specific reason why you're not able to come back to work right now? We really need you here. And then once they let you know about that reasoning, then we can figure out, do they qualify for the new federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act? I'm going to call it FFCRA. Do they qualify for any FFCRA leave time? Because then if they do, we have to offer it. And we'll get into the eligibility for FFCRA. But let's say they don't apply for an FFCRA leave and they're just not willing to come back because they're getting more money on unemployment. You've got a couple options for your recourse. Number one, you're going to let EDD know that there's work available to them and they've declined it. So that's going to get them kicked off EDD. And then they'll probably want to come back pretty quickly after that. Because if there's work available and they've declined it, they can't receive unemployment benefits because work is available. So first and foremost, let EDD know, hey, I've got work for this person. They're not coming back. Another option is to offer the premium pay. So if they're willing, if they could be willing to come back, meaning they're not ill, they have childcare, you can tell them, we're willing to offer you a premium. We understand the hazards right now. Some people call it hazard pay. I'm calling it like the general premium pay, because hazard pay is really more appropriate in situations where someone's interacting with the public a lot. So delivery drivers, grocery workers, healthcare workers, people in those types of industries, sometimes they're getting hazard pay. It's not something that's legally required right now. There's talk in Washington about requiring a federal hazard pay, but there's nothing on the books right now. So that's just within your discretion whether you want to offer that or not. But if you do offer premium pay to your workers to get people to come back, I would say, depending on the classification of that person, so what type of department they're in or what type of worker they are, you need to really strongly consider offering that hazard pay or premium pay to everybody within that department. Because otherwise you could run into a discrimination or retaliation claim. Because if you give that pay to, say, a male employee and you're not providing it to female employees, guess what? You got a Fair Employment and Housing Act violation, a Fair Pay Act violation. So really think carefully. Plan and prepare is the name of the game with all things employment. Plan and prepare for offering the pay. If you can't afford to offer it to everybody, I wouldn't offer it because you're just going to set yourself up for legal liability. So.
What about FMLA? I mean, obviously there's a state level, but the federal, with the new CARES Act, there's some differences there. My understanding is that, maybe it's up to 12 weeks. And I mean, that can be applied to because I got a kid home from school and I can't work and I'm trying to put them through homeschooling or whatever. Or maybe got the coronavirus, or maybe somebody in my family's got it, or they've got some other health condition, or maybe I got an elderly parent I've got to look after. And I can't work.
So in all those circumstances, you would qualify for either. We're going to start with the federal paid sick leave. So under FFCRA, it encompasses 2 types of leave: 2 weeks or 80 hours for your full-time workers, a federal paid sick leave, and that goes.
That the employer pays, right?
Yeah. So your employers will get a payroll tax credit reimbursement from the federal government on the back end for it. So you'll be able to actually fill out an IRS form. And if you pay out some of that FFCRA leave, either the federal paid sick leave or the expanded FMLA, you will get a tax credit reimbursement for everything you pay out, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Be mindful, if you've received a payroll protection or a PPP loan, you can't use those PPP loan funds to pay out the FFCRA leave. So that's when things get really complicated, when we've got small business loans going on. So make sure you consult with legal counsel if you have received those loan funds, because it cannot, that would be double dipping. You get a windfall because you get the tax credit reimbursement on the back end and you used your loan funds. So don't do that. Plan and prepare. Strategize with your attorney. But so under FFCRA, you've got the sick leave, you've got the expanded FMLA. So expanded FMLA is only for when you're unable to do any work, meaning including remote work, because you are the sole caregiver for your child. And your child's school is closed, or the daycare is closed, what have you. So with the federal sick leave, that's a little bit more open-ended. It covers a lot of different scenarios, all the scenarios that Fletcher just mentioned. You're caring for someone who's got coronavirus. You've been exposed to coronavirus and a healthcare provider has told you to quarantine at home. Your kid's school is closed due to coronavirus-related precautions, and you're their sole caregiver. There are some, fine details, because it's a pretty narrow law. A lot of people think, oh, there's a stay-at-home order, I qualify for FFCRA. Not correct. If you're furloughed, you do not qualify for FFCRA. If you've been laid off, you don't qualify for FFCRA. And again, within each of those categories of eligibility, there's quite a few restrictions on it. Like if you and your partner are at home taking care of your children who are out of school, only one of you is needed to care for the children. So only one of you is going to qualify for the FFCRA leave. If you've got somebody else there who can take care of your kids, you're not going to qualify for it. You can work, if you can perform some remote work, then you're not going to qualify for FFCRA during the time that you can do the remote work. You can use it intermittently. So there's a lot of different things to consider with FFCRA, but that's a pretty broad overview for you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I definitely got to look out for that. I mean, that could be a lot of cash out of pocket that you're going to have to carry to wait to get that tax credit, right? And it's something that's a big consideration. So anything you can do to keep your people working and keep them, hopefully off of that. But if they need it, make sure that you're applying it appropriately, because then again, you're opening yourself up to some pitfalls there. So, yeah. Let's see. So, what else did we not cover, Iris? I know we probably came up with a couple of other little things prior to jumping on here, or we didn't get updated on the slides here. What were some other considerations that people should be having from the? Yeah.
I think it was a pretty big picture overview. I mean, the biggest thing here is if you're conducting layoffs, do it in a manner where, you've got people that the employees know doing the actual layoff. Keep the layoff short and sweet. You don't need to go into a big, long, lengthy speech about everybody. Just give them the opportunity to ask a few questions. Limit that opportunity though, and then have a contact person for who's going to answer questions. And then think about other strategies for minimizing exposure to legal claims, like offering a severance agreement. That's great. And then other strategies would be what Fletcher is going to talk about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Iris. That was very helpful and enlightening. And yeah, I mean, the other strategy here, is I think severance is a great plan, and a lot of severance plans involve some sort of outplacement. Look, with 30%, there are 10% of the population unemployed, 20%, 20+% unemployment. It's going to be a long road for people getting back to work. And so, helping them, providing them that resource, I fully endorse, what Ira said. Let's, make it a small, very personal thing. If you are going to offer an outplacement, I would encourage you booking the first appointment for them during that session with their career counselor. I mean, it's like not just saying like, here's a pamphlet, here are some resources. Obviously you need to have all those ready and have those prepared and have it neat and orderly. Don't forget them. Don't forget to do some of these things that you have to do, because obviously that's going to come back to bite you from a legal perspective. But it also shows that you care, that you've planned, you've thought through this, you've thought through what kind of questions that there might be having, that you have an appropriate response for some of these questions. And breaking that down into a small group of people and doing it personally, where the supervisor is actually doing the layoff. That's the person that's got the strongest connection, can show the highest degree of empathy, and then help them at that moment take the next step in their life. And one of the things that I think is a little bit different, is particularly for us, and I guess I'll skip ahead on this, is everybody in this situation is going to have their own personal needs. There's going to be financial situations. There's going to be personal needs that relate to social services and childcare and healthcare and mental health, and a lot of different unique scenarios that each individual that's being laid off is going to need. So if you're doing that layoff meeting and you're able to talk to them and let them know that, hey, part of this is we're going to provide you a career counselor. And the very first thing that they're going to do is help you understand your basic needs and help you get connected to those resources. Some of those you're going to be bringing in through the workforce development program. Some of them are going to be through social service, but everybody's going to have a unique need. And every market that this happens in is going to have a different set of resources available. There's going to be the federal, state, and local, especially the larger municipalities are going to have other unique programs. I mean, LAUSDA, Los Angeles Unified School District, is giving away free meals. I mean, that's something that's available to those people in that community that maybe is different in other communities. So having a compassionate, a caring tone, it does have to be, you do have to, stick to a script to some degree. But practice it and know what you're going to say, and anticipate the questions that are going to occur, and have resources and answers for them is going to be very helpful. But then, like Ira said, have that company contact or somebody there. But that's also where a career counselor can really assist your company, because that can take a lot of resources to be constantly available for these folks. And so assigning them a dedicated career counselor can be really, really helpful. And that's where the outplacement services come in, really is to be that liaison, to have that caring face, to have somebody that these people can connect with over a long period of time, and have the same person that gets to know them in their own unique scenarios, and then helping them through that transition, which starts with getting back on their feet, and then through the process of working on getting back to work. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we get into the types of things that people are going to need, and that I would encourage us as employers to provide them. You don't have to pay an outplacement service like us. You can do this on your own, and everything's free on our website. So all of the resources that these people are going to need are totally free. You can use them, you can borrow them, you can download them, you can put together your own program and coach people through them. I would just be tickled pink if you did that. I think they really need these things, and they need this support. They're going to need it, and it's a way we can care. But it starts with what Iris has been talking about, is have a plan. And the only thing I'd really add to that is I want to make this plan as smart as possible. If you're familiar with making it specific, measurable, actionable, and time-bound, there is legal outcomes that we want to have measured. And, maybe we want to set a benchmark for what our historic costs are from our employment legal employment costs are, understand what those are, and understand how much we can budget towards those, because some of these things are going to happen. There's going to be costs, legal costs associated with this. So you probably want to set a budget aside to deal with some of these claims you're going to come up with. But then the question is what is like what's acceptable, what's kind of unacceptable, and what would be catastrophic for your business, and understand what those are. So when you're thinking about doing these things, that you understand what the costs are going to be on the back end, and you're creating a very specific and measurable time-bound plan to target where you want those to be. And then also create strategies to minimize those things, like severance, or making sure you're getting your paperwork done. You're meeting with your employment attorney, you're coming up with a plan, you're working with an outplacement service, or you're providing the other different types of benefits that are going to soften the blow of having a sudden job loss for employees. There's another piece of this, and I think the bird scenario really highlights that, is what's going to happen to your brand and your employer brand. So both the brand that your customer sees and your employer brand. And that's a much squishier target, but you want to come up with a smart plan there. How do you want people to feel? What do you want them to say about you on Glassdoor? What do you want them to say about you on Indeed? How are you going to measure this, right? So if you're laying a bunch of people off, we're going to want to measure these things. You're going to want to have a strategy for doing that. And you can do this on your own, but if something is an outplacement service, that's something that I would make mandatory in order to engage a client, is that we're measuring that sentiment so that we can show what the results were. Just an easy measurement is your employer net promoter score. If you're familiar with that, it's a simple question. You should be asking people after they've been laid off over a period of time, how likely are you to recommend a friend, colleague, or family member to come work for you as an employer on a scale of 1 to 10? And if you're getting 9s and 10s after a layoff, then you've done an excellent job. If you're getting 7s and 8s, you've done a decent job, and that's considered neutral. And if you're getting a 6 or below, then your employer brand has definitely been hurt. So you can measure that, and you can create a target, and you should be taking actions to help achieve that goal there in the end. So having a real clear plan is really critical there. So first step is every individual in your company has their own unique situations. Everything you can do to address people's own unique situations and make sure that they have the very more specific resources that they need is very, very helpful. So some of those things are helping them get through the unemployment process. So I've heard of companies offering computer terminals to their workforce and staggering, how I think Iris mentioned this, staggering when they come in and giving them access to those computer terminals and assisting them through that unemployment process. Getting them connected with a tax professional. Look, if you're in that, I can't remember, but I think it's like less than $75,000 or $80,000 a year, you're eligible for a one-time $1,200 payment. You can't get that unless you file your taxes. So get that done right away. Encourage them to do that. Make sure that they're aware of this option. If they owe money, then they can defer their tax payment. So maybe on the flip side, they still should be meeting with their tax professional to figure out how much they might owe and how much liability they have. You've got until July 15th now to do that, but plus you've also got an extension window after that. So getting that done is really critical first and foremost. And then the next thing is we really got to be thinking about the individual's critical needs. So housing, food, healthcare, dealing with debt that they have, dealing with all their other financial obligations, childcare, elderly care if you're dealing with elderly parents, down to just simple things like food and clothing, right? So all of these things, everybody's going to be dealing with in their own level. People who have high salaries have a different set of obligations than people who are maybe in the lower end of the pay scale. So they're all going to have different unique needs, and providing as many resources for them as possible that can help them navigate dealing with these challenges that they're about to have. So the next phase of kind of getting back on their feet, right? We've dealt with, I can't even begin thinking about going back to work until I've got all my basic needs secured. If I'm still worrying about, getting unemployment money or filing that, or just figuring out where I'm going to get food for the next month, then I'm not going to be able to focus on getting back to work. But from an outplacement service provider, we're going to help them with all those things first, right off the bat. That's like the first week and a half that we're getting them their own unique custom game plan and getting them through all those things. And then right away in, week 2 or 2.5, then we can begin to focus on getting their resume updated, getting their letters of recommendation. Iris maybe can chime in on this at some point, but I highly recommend when you're doing the layoff, have your letters of recommendations ready for them. Have the supervisor write these and hand them to the people at the time. And you got to do it equitably, right?
Yes. And just be mindful. If you're going to offer the letter of recommendation, I would kind of make it somewhat formulaic just to make sure that we're being fair across the board. And if you're going to offer it to some people, be prepared to offer it to almost everybody that you're laying off.
Yeah, everybody, I think, right?
For equity purposes, to avoid those legal claims. Some companies have a policy where they're only going to provide, dates of employment and position titles, and they're not going to provide any further information because of the employee confidentiality issues that could arise. So if you're going to do a reference letter, do it in writing, provide it to them there, like Fletcher mentioned, and just consult with legal counsel.
Yeah, I do it universally, and I'd keep it pretty, standard. And right. The biggest issue in this U.S. Supreme Court weighed in on references, and they're actually huge advocates of it. When the laws were passed, it's all about discrimination. So if you're providing, white males really glowing letters of recommendation or references, but your minority employees are getting, worse recommendations, you're just bound to have a problem, right? And so if you're smart and you work with your employment attorney on that, I would come up with a very kind of standard one that's nice. But I mean, that goes a long ways. I mean, as a guy like me who consults with employers on hiring practices, I don't recommend anybody who can't get a reference from their past direct supervisor. So
as employers, this is a great opportunity. You can just add in a phrase to that reference letter that states something along the lines of, the service was excellent. They were a dedicated employee, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, we were unable to, keep them employed. That way, it shows that this was a great employee and was not terminated due to performance issues. I think that would be a great standard line to put in there.
Yeah, and if you're really concerned about it, maybe you can tone the language down a little bit, but but it's about doing it universally is the gist. And again, I would definitely, especially if you've got a lot of people you're laying off, I would definitely consult with an employment attorney to just make sure you get that language down right. But I think it's invaluable and it shows you care a lot, right? So it's all, it's a very big gesture there. So anyways, if you're not providing, or if you are providing, either way, we're going to be coaching people through how to get that information from their past supervisors and colleagues so that they can come armed with that information to their next interview. Obviously getting their LinkedIn ready, or getting, especially these job boards these days have a lot of resume databases, getting them on and ready and prepared where they can be found. Doing personality assessments and creating mission and vision statements to have a better understanding of themselves and what it is that they want in their future for their family and themselves. I personally went through the process of creating a personal mission and vision statement about 7 years ago during a life event. And it has guided me in every way since that day. And it's amazing. I look back at that and it really hasn't changed a whole lot. And it's created a lot of clarity for me in what I want to do with myself personally, but also in a professional way. And it's been an amazing and enlightening experience. And it's really helpful, especially if you're about to go into a career search and if you know yourself better because you've done some personality assessments and you've created this mission and vision. It's going to help you target your ideal career opportunity. And the more focused you can be on that, then the more successful you're going to be in that job search. So obviously writing an impactful cover letter. One of the cool things we have today is video and creating an impactful video resume so that you can get your message to employers and hiring managers in a much more impactful way. So that's something that we really coach people through there as well. Iris?
That's great. I mean, you guys always have great ideas, and that's a fun one.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah. And so when you get to the final phase, now we're all prepared. Now we need to strategically go after these jobs, right? So the number one way to get a job is referrals. So those references, the people, your colleagues, your old supervisors, friends and family. So I'd start there. And again, if you have a video resume and somebody connects you with an opportunity and then, that leads to something, then you can get that message right in front of the hiring manager in an impactful way. So you start there, and we coach people through. There's a little strategy, some tips and tricks on how to leverage your personal network to get opportunities. Number 2 is more strategically job searching. So you can be looking for jobs on a job board. You may find one that's your perfect dream career that you're well qualified for, that you'd love to have. You can create a custom video resume right there for that job, talking about how you're going to help that company solve those problems. And then you can send it to them right there on LinkedIn or a personal email. So using LinkedIn to like a recruiter would, but to search for your own job and get the message in front of the decision maker, not a recruiter, not a paper pusher, really get to the person who's going to say, yes, I want to hire you. Yes, I want to have another interview with you. And then the last method is the job boards. Job boards are a black hole. So we want to approach that strategically, and so we want to give people some good strategies on how they're going to go about doing that. And there's a lot of tools you can build in, or that they have built in. So job alerts, just really fine tuning your target and your resume to match those target jobs, so that you do get looked at more. The likelihood of your resume getting looked at gets done much better. Making sure that resumes are built to be scraped by AI and resume parsers. So I've seen too many times, I see this a lot in marketing, is it's a beautiful resume and portfolio and this and that, but the job parsing or the resume parsing and the AI bots, they don't know what to do with that document. So, it goes to the back of the pile. It was an amazing presentation, but it just got ignored because it was too fancy you outsmarted the technology. So we want to make sure we build resumes that don't outsmart the technology, that play nice with it, so that you increase your chances there. And then the other thing, so our outplacement service is a 4-week program. They meet with the same career counselor, but then after that, because this is going to take a long time, we're going to provide indefinite support. They can schedule a call ad hoc anytime, email, text, there with their career counselor. So they're having a particular problem or challenge with one of these strategies or just something in general, they're going to have that person there. So that's a continued job coaching piece, because this is going to be a long time. 20% unemployment rate, it's going to be years before we get back to the sub 5% that we saw when we were talking about full employment. The other thing that while that's going on, and Iris talked about this, so part of the WARN Act, and obviously, is notifying your local workforce development. You can do that without needing to do it, and I would encourage companies to do that. We partner with New Horizons Learning Centers, their national workforce or kind of vocational skill training program. And most people are going to qualify for free skill training, vocational training. And that's everything from like very basic stuff, like, I don't know, computer skills like Excel or things like that, to advanced things like leadership or Six Sigma. And the course catalogs are broad and never ending. So while you're job searching, or maybe now you're deciding you need to shift gears in your career and focus on a different kind of job, this is a great opportunity. So getting people connected with these workforce development programs so that they can get free training. This doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost the employee anything, but getting connected and getting tuned into those is really crucial. Real quick, I'll just go through kind of the key features of our program. It's everything that we talked about is included. So that way anybody at any level can get the needs that they have, their specific needs met. Not everybody's going to need every single aspect of it, but everybody's going to need many parts of what we talked about, right? So having dedicated career counselors goes a long ways. Our team has been with us for a really long time. They're a top-notch class of professionals there. So they'll have the same person that they're dealing with. They'll have group-led ones in addition to their individual coach. They're going to have peer-to-peer kind of group-led to fine-tune any one of these topics that we talked about twice weekly. Then private Facebook group for peer-to-peer coaching and sharing and learning. And networking for job opportunities. So all that's there. And the employee satisfaction survey, or that employer net promoter, or a customized one if we want to come up with a customized set of sentiments that you're looking to measure there. So, and if you have a large enough workforce, then we're going to advocate, like we've done for some of our other clients, is directly transfer that workforce to another workforce, kind of like we talked about, and loaning it, so we can really target those jobs for mass employment type situations. So that's also very helpful if we're talking about a lot of people. Our clients, we have over 100 reviews on 2 different platforms. They're all 4 to 5 stars, and all revolves around top-notch service and results. So, we're very well liked there. And, we've talked a lot about this today, but, failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And so, with that, what kind of questions do we have? Iris been all over them.
I've been answering them a little bit. They kind of slowed down, but if anybody has any questions or wants to talk through any specific employment situations, don't hesitate to call me, email me. My contact information will be passed around.
Yeah.
And I'm always happy to chat with anyone about all things related to employment, coronavirus in the workplace, and return to work plans. I know it's a big one. So just give me a call.
Yeah. If you have you want to put your contact information in the chat as well?
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
And in the recording, I'll send that out as well. So, it looks like Franco put that on there as well. If you'd like a one-on-one free consultation with us to talk about, some different types of benefits that you can offer, folks, and how to do that, happy to do a one-on-one consultation with you. Totally no obligations. Again, remember, everything's free on our website. Our services are very low cost. We don't need to hide about pricing. If you've got more than 50 employees, we charge $300 a person. And if you've got less than that, it's no more than $750. So, it's relatively inexpensive, very inexpensive. I mean, you're talking less than a day's wages in most cases to provide a comprehensive set of services for them on the back end. And Iris is there, definitely happy to consult. And if you're out of the area and you'd like a referral to other employment attorneys more in your state or area, you can also ping us and we can get you connected with some of those folks as well. And so, yeah.